Hey, this is Rich over at TVP Live with another quick tips tutorials brought to you by Photoshop Elements Custom Tutorials Group. And let's jump right in with today's poster. Want us to know how to create convincing watercolors for a drawing. So I picked this because it already has a photo and it has a charcoal drawing that we can kind of color in. So there's so many different ways to do this on Elements. I'm just going to show you one way. We're going to do this by adding layers and coloring each layer in with different brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and add a blank layer, and we're going to pick out brushes. If you come down here to the regular brushes, they're called default brushes. That's not what we want. We want to change that. Let's go down here to pen pressure, and what that means is the longer you hold the mouse button down, the more it fills in. And I'll give you an example. We're going to come down here and scroll down and find one that's called clogged airbrush opacity. And it's hard to find because they don't have any names on these. But I think it's this one right here. It kind of looks like a DNA strand, and it says 25. That's the brush size. So if I click that, and now it's at 25 point, let's go ahead and make that bigger, like 100 point. And let's go ahead and pick the actual color. So I'm going to take the eyedropper and come down to her skin tone. I don't want anything too bright or too dark. I'll just go right in the middle, right around here. And for example, if I take that brush and go over her eyeball once, you can see that it's see-through. It's like almost a 50% see-through. Now if I go over it twice, it's less see-through. So the more you go over it, or the more you go back and forth, it fills in more and more. That's what a pen pressure does, which is really good because that's how watercolors work. So now that I have this 100-point size, I can go ahead and start filling in the painting like this. If I got tighter spots that are going to be obviously smaller, I'll come down here and change that from 100 to 50 point size and then fill this in separately like that. Now before you change color, I want to maybe get rid of some of the edges that were bleeding. I'll take the eraser and it's set at 20%, and I could just follow along the hairline and just keep that color within the skin of her face there. And that looks pretty good. I can always take the polygon tool and get rid of the rest, but I don't really have to because we're probably going to fill in the neck with the same color also. So now let's get rid of the edges on the lips so we can come back and do the lips separately. It doesn't have to be perfect because this is artwork. Now let's go ahead and start a new layer. We'll click right here. Now we got a new empty layer. Let's grab the eyedropper tool again. We'll come down and grab a portion of her lips right here. We'll grab that. And with the same brush, but it changed the color, we can actually change it to any other color we want. I can make it a little more vibrant like this. Let's make the brush size down to like 20% and paint in the lips. And you see I'm not going to the very edge because this brush size is a little too big to fit in those little corners. But that's okay because we can always take the smudge tool, set that to about 20%, and stretch those into those little corners that's hard to get to. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. Now, if that's too hot and we want to see a little more of the charcoal painting, you can always come up here to the opacity and then lessen the opacity. See how that changes the lips? So let's say we wanted more of the drawing behind it. I'll lessen the opacity to like 70%, but if it's too light, you just go to Enhance Lighting Brightness, and now you just bring the brightness down, and it changes the brightness of the lips without hiding what's behind it because the opacity is set to 70%. I could take the contrast and make it a little bit more vibrant like that. Bring the brightness down. Look how nice that looks. Here's the before, after, before, after. Looking pretty good. I'll hit OK. Now I noticed that I missed some of the facial color up here, so I can go back to this layer, grab the smudge brush, and I can smudge that up here back up to the eyeball like that. Sure everything is covered. That's looking pretty good. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing with the hair. We're going to grab the eyedropper tool and grab a portion of her hair that's brown right around there, let's say. I'm going to come back here and look at it. We'll give it a little bit more reddish tone. And We can back out a little bit there. Grab our brush, make it really big. I could probably make this about 150 point. Look how big that is. Make a new layer. I always forget to make a new layer. New layer, blank layer. Now we can draw in that brown. Because you know why? See how it's overlapping a little bit? We want to be able to erase some of that overlap afterwards. And we couldn't do that if it was married to the other layer of the face. That's why we want to create new layers for every new color. I'm just tracing her hair like this. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's watercolor. Watercolor is not perfection. It's about the artistic style. And it's okay if you leave it on too long and it kind of makes the hair disappear, because later on we can take the opacity down. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring it down so that I can see the edge and I can erase the edge. So I'll take this 100%, bring it down to like 60%, grab the eraser and come back, and with a 30-point eraser, erase where I don't want the hairline to go onto the face, so that there's a definite differentiation between the hairline and the face. And I can do the same thing with the outline on the outside. And sometimes if you have overlapping beyond what you're erasing, there's a little trick how to get rid of that extra stuff that you don't want, which I'm going to show you. So we traced all the hair out and then we cut out the extra pieces on the hair, and we want to get rid of what's beyond the extra pieces, all this stuff. So what I'm going to do is put a layer in between and then paint that layer the opposite color so I can see the difference. Let's say go to pure black and I'll fill in that layer with pure black. So all that shows up left is the hairline. That hairline at 60%, if I bring it back up to 100%, now you can see exactly what portion that we have, what we want, and what we don't want. Now with the polygon tool, I can come down here and carefully get rid of everything beyond the edge that we don't want. Now hit delete and do the same thing with each of 4 or so areas. Delete, and finally, and delete. And that cleaned up all the edges. Let's go ahead and turn off that masking layer. And there's the hair. Obviously it's too hot at 100% opacity. Let's bring it down a little bit to something like 75%. I like that because you can still see the pencil drawings underneath it. Now the facials is too hot. That's at 100%. Let's bring that down to about, let's see, 75%. That's looking really good. Next, let's do the skin tone here. I'm going to create an extra layer. Grab the skin down here and take the brush. Let's make it a really big brush, like 100 point again. And just paint that skin right in. Now, carefully with the eraser on its own layer, we'll just erase everything beyond what we want. And then I'll just follow the dress line. And it's that easy. Once again, like we did before, I'm going to, so I'll take this black mask, bring it back up, turn it back on. Now we see what we don't want. And with the polygon tool, get rid of those little spots beyond what we erased that we don't want. Boom, boom, boom. Double click. And there we go. Let's turn off that mask, that temporary mask. We can back out a little bit. That's looking pretty good. And next I can paint out on top of the letters. So we can have these letters in here. You probably may not have these type of letters with the eraser. I'm not going to do it perfectly because this is just an example. And that basically brings back the fonts. And finally, let's go ahead and do something with the dress here. I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool again and grab a little bit of blue here from the dress. Come over here. That looks pretty good. Let's make it a little more vibrant. That's artistic choice. Grab the brush again. Oh, we almost forget. New layer. And paint that dress in. Now with the eraser tool, I'm going to get rid of everything that I don't want. Bring this down to like a 20%. And you can see that extra stuff over there that we want to get rid of afterwards. We call that overspray. And now we want to get rid of the overspray. So I'm going to take my fake false mask, put it right underneath that layer. Now we can see exactly what the extra stuff is. This time I'll use the polygon tool because it's easy to just kind of freehand draw this stuff out that we don't want. Do the same thing over here. And that's looking pretty good. Let's turn off false mask and lessen the opacity of the dress here. I think at about 75%. And there we go. It's not perfect watercolor, but it's not too bad. It's almost believable. So there we have a good example of one way to do watercolors. This is Rich calling it quits for this tutorial, saying over and out.